So nobody saw this massive fight coming up. This wasn't a rumor. We didn't see Dana White putting it on the whiteboard and a picture been taken and everybody spotting it in the background. And obviously I'm talking about Israel Adesanya versus Ian Garry for the cringiest, most retarded fighter on the UFC roster. Not the fight we wanted to see, but maybe the one we deserved as MMA fans currently. And I think the way that the media and YouTube content creators, the biggest on the platform, actually talked about this story gives a real insight to where we're going in terms of the content creation surrounding MMA. So we had the Israel Adesanya story where there was a road rage incident and there was some racial slurs thrown towards him. Of course, we didn't see the beginning of the video, we didn't see the end of the video, we just saw a little snippet from the middle where it appeared that there was a man approaching him and they had a little bit of a back and forth. We saw the outlandishly ridiculous statement coming from Israel Adesanya in the aftermath of that, talking about pressing charges.
That's gross.
You remember the MMA media, the community, the ex-fighters having an absolute meltdown because Colby Covington pressed charges after Jorge Masvidal jumped him from behind in a restaurant? Well, I think the same thing should apply in this case. Isn't it interesting that all these people aren't talking about Israel pressing charges and how much of a move that is? Interesting, right? It just seems to be common ground where fighters kind of land on when it comes to outside altercations. But for Israel Adesanya, he's pressing charges because his feelings were hurt with some made up racial terms. Apparently, we didn't see any of that on the actual clip. We don't know if the clip is real or if it's fake. What we do know is that he was grabbing his genital area, which isn't uncommon for this guy. He was spitting on the ground. He was derogatory towards this other dude's car because he was in a sports car. So very in line with the way this dude holds himself. But where's the PR team for Israel Adesanya? The guy has spent the last 13 months having a mental breakdown because there was a white fighter from South Africa. He had an absolute meltdown, pretty much lost his career in MMA because of being triggered by a white African, breaking down in tears. And what's really ironic about this is that he repeatedly used racial terms towards Dricus du Plessis, the middleweight champion of the world, over and over again. No media members spoke about it. No content creators spoke about it, except for maybe myself and MMA Guru. So he's been on this tirade for 13 months, culminating with him being on his back, getting choked out. Awesome. He taps out and all of a sudden all that venom, all that vitriol for the last 13 months kind of dissipates like tears in the rain. Nobody talks about it, definitely not Israel Adesanya, and we have all these beautiful embraces in the aftermath of that fight. At the time we spoke about what would have actually happened if he had got the win, would we have seen the exchanging of pleasantries? Would we have seen the exchanging of African jackets and parents meeting up in the background? I'm sure we would not. And that is just the measure of the man, right? So we start putting the pieces together on Israel Adesanya. 13-month mental breakdown, culminating with losing another fight, culminating with interactions with dogs and nail varnish and lipstick. You sprinkle in a few DUIs and a few road rage incidents, and you sprinkle in a few random statements on podcasts and really bizarre stuff like that. And what you have is a PR disaster. But again, cover was run for him by the biggest people in the MMA UFC industry. We all know that now. I've spoke about it at length. Where's the PR team? Where is his friends? Where are the ex-fighters who know this game and know the PR game better than anyone, calling him and saying, dude, stop talking about your personal space being invaded and that you felt threatened on the street, because we've literally spent about 6 years talking about how elite you are and nobody could come near you on the street because you'd kick their head off. And now we have to put up with you talking about pressing charges because your feelings were hurt and that it's crazy that I can't go and get a bite to eat after training. It's just terrible PR, terrible visuals, absolutely shocking. And that really is what I'm talking about here in terms of PR and what the aesthetics of how these people carry themselves are and how cover is run for them constantly. You jump over to Ian Garry. We spoke about him in the past. Absolute PR disaster with this guy. I can't even put into words how cringe it is. And then we have the video from the weekend. Do I need to show it? Do I need to talk about it in depth? Probably not. Let's just say that when you thought that Ian Garry couldn't become any more cringe and retarded, he blows them expectations out of the water and starts rapping, holding flowers, begging his wife for forgiveness, and they put this stuff out in public. No PR awareness whatsoever from his manager or his team or even himself as a human being. And you have to ask yourself the question then, with all this craziness, how is it perceived by the experts? How is it perceived by the UFC? How is it perceived by the biggest content creators on the platform. Well, they give these guys a pass. Last week during Israel Adesanya's interaction on the street, he was called perfect. It was absolutely perfect the way he handled himself. And that's what we expect from a champion like Israel Adesanya. And then we jump over to Ian Garry, and still the media side of it lightly touch on it. Then they might put out an article that's saying that fans online, which kind of alludes to some sort of like incels or guys in their basement. But nobody has the balls to come out and say it. Now, I've been doing these videos for about a year and a half, and I've been constantly trying to come out and tell the truth. And as a result of it, I've become demonetized. I've become suppressed on this platform. That's fine. We'll keep going. We'll keep trying to tell the truth, because you know why? I feel that there's a positive uptick on what we're actually doing here on this channel. You look around at some of the biggest content creators, guys with 400,000 subscribers, 1.3 million subscribers, 700,000 subscribers, and all of a sudden we're starting to see their numbers depleted. Absolutely shocking numbers for channels that are that huge. And you have to ask yourself the question, why is that? Why is it we see a lot of the mainstream MMA content creators who used to turn their nose up to people like Guru, or even myself a year ago, who used to sneer at Guru, calling him fat bearded guy in his basement, in his mom's back room, whatever it was. Now all of a sudden have him coming on podcasts for interviews. What he has done over there on that channel has changed the face of MMA media content creation, whether you like it or whether you hate it. I personally love what he does. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I think that it's amazing to see shills, and that's the word I'm going to use, seeing shills fall down on their knees because of trying to toe the line with the prospect of maybe having an interview with a famous fighter. I don't give a fuck about interviewing famous fighters. I don't give a fuck about being invited onto companions with famous people. Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. I've been watching MMA for 20 years. I've been training. My kids train. I am embedded in this sport. I set up last weekend and watched a pretty boring card on my own until 4 o'clock in the morning, like I always do. And when you're embedded in the sport as much as I am or other people are, you want to see the truth be told. That's all I've ever wanted. I've wanted to see the main guys, the toughest guys, the baddest guys to come out of UFC to tell the truth. And if there's any advice that I could give to people who have huge channels with small numbers, who are literally some of the toughest guys and some of the smartest guys and some of the best shit talkers that you'll ever see in the game, it would be to tell the truth. To tell the truth and stop gaslighting, whether you know you're doing it or not, or whether you're just trying to protect your position within the company or not. Tell the truth. If you do that, you'll actually tap into the same audience that Guru has. And you don't have to talk about him randomly on your podcast or use thumbnails with his face on it. Just tell the truth. The truth will set you free. And in terms of the biggest fight that happened this weekend that we didn't know was going to happen, Israel Adesanya versus Ian Garry for the most retarded and cringiest person on the planet, who came out on top? Let me know down below. Was it Ian Garry dancing with the head wiggling like that, looking up at his wife for a little bit of approval? Or was it Israel Adesanya, who was grabbing his crotch and pointing at the floor and spitting and laughing at some randomer's car, and then coming out talking about his personal space was invaded and he's pressing charges? Let me know down below who you think is the cringiest dude on the platform, and if any of this made sense, maybe hit like, subscribe and share. Cheers.